By January 1945, World War II in Europe was entering its final phase, but victory was far from certain. While Allied forces had liberated most of France following the D-Day invasion, a significant German salient remained in Alsace, the Colmar Pocket, a bulge of German-held territory west of the Rhine River. This pocket, held by the German 19th Army under General Siegfried Rasp, contained approximately 50,000 Wehrmacht soldiers who had been bypassed during the autumn Allied advance. The pocket posed both a strategic threat — German forces could launch attacks into the Allied rear areas — and a symbolic problem, as the French government desperately wanted all French territory liberated. The mission to eliminate the Colmar Pocket fell primarily to the French First Army under General Jean de Lattre de Tassigny, reinforced by the U.S. 3rd Infantry Division and other American units. The winter of 1944–45 was brutal in Alsace, with deep snow, freezing temperatures, and conditions that favored defenders over attackers. The 3rd Infantry Division, nicknamed the Rock of the Marne for its World War I service, was one of the U.S. Army's most battle-hardened formations by January 1945. The division had landed in North Africa in November 1942, fought through Tunisia, Sicily, and Italy, including the savage fighting at Anzio, then participated in Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France in August 1944. By winter 1945, the 3rd Infantry Division had been in continuous combat for over 2 years, longer than virtually any other American division. Its soldiers were exhausted, under strength, and facing an enemy that, despite losing the war, remained dangerous and capable. The German forces in the Colmar Pocket included veterans from the Eastern Front who knew how to fight in winter conditions and how to make attackers pay for every yard of ground. The fighting around Holtzwihr and nearby villages throughout January 1945 was characterized by close-range infantry combat, limited visibility due to weather, and high casualties on both sides. Into this frozen hell came Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, 3rd Infantry Division, commanded by 2nd Lieutenant Audie Murphy. The 15th Infantry was one of the division's 3 rifle regiments, and Company B was a line infantry unit that had fought its way from Sicily to the Rhine. By January 1945, the company was severely understrength. Instead of the authorized 193 men, Company B fielded fewer than 40 combat-effective soldiers. The rest lost to casualties, disease, and exhaustion. Murphy himself had been with the 3rd Infantry Division since North Africa, working his way up from private to 2nd lieutenant through a combination of extraordinary combat ability and the attrition of his superiors. At 19 years old, having lied about his age to enlist in 1942, Murphy was already a combat veteran of a dozen major battles, with a reputation as an exceptional soldier and leader. His men trusted him completely because he shared their dangers, never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself, and seemed to possess an almost supernatural ability to survive situations that killed others. The action at Holtzwihr would test all of Murphy's skills and courage to their absolute limits. Audie Leon Murphy was born on June 20, 1925, in Kingston, Texas, into crushing poverty. The son of a sharecropper, Murphy grew up in a family of 12 children, 9 of whom survived infancy during the Great Depression. His childhood was marked by hunger, hardship, and the early death of his mother when Murphy was 16. His father abandoned the family, leaving young Audie to help support his siblings through hunting and odd jobs. The hunting skills Murphy developed as a child, patience, marksmanship, and understanding of terrain and concealment, would later save his life dozens of times in combat. When Pearl Harbor was attacked in December 1941, Murphy was 16 years old, undersized at 5'5" and 110 pounds, but determined to serve. He tried to enlist in every service branch and was rejected by all of them. The Marines said he was too short, the Navy said he was too young, and the Army Air Corps said his education was insufficient. Finally, on his 18th birthday in June 1943, after his sister helped forge documents making him appear older, Murphy enlisted in the U.S. Army. Murphy completed basic training at Camp Walters, Texas, and advanced infantry training at Fort Meade, Maryland, before being assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division in North Africa in early 1943. He arrived as a replacement in Company B, 15th Infantry Regiment, just as the division was preparing for the invasion of Sicily. Murphy's first combat came in July 1943 during the Sicily campaign, and it was there that fellow soldiers first recognized his unusual qualities as a fighter. While many soldiers freeze or panic in their first combat, Murphy displayed ice-cold calm under fire, exceptional marksmanship, and an aggressive fighting spirit that contrasted sharply with his quiet, unassuming demeanor out of combat. During the Sicily fighting, Murphy killed his first German soldiers, a pair of officers he caught in the open with rifle fire from 250 yards. The kills were clean, professional, and revealed natural talent for the deadly business of infantry combat. Murphy's rise through the ranks was meteoric by infantry standards, driven by both his combat effectiveness and the brutal attrition rate among infantry leaders. By the time of the Anzio landings in January 1944, Murphy had been promoted to corporal and then sergeant. Anzio was perhaps the most savage fighting Murphy experienced. Months of attritional combat in the beachhead, German counterattacks, constant shelling, and conditions that resembled WWII trench warfare. It was at Anzio that Murphy's reputation truly solidified. On multiple occasions, he single-handedly held positions against German attacks, his rifle work so devastating that German commanders sometimes reported facing much larger American forces than actually present. Murphy's company commander noted in his evaluation that Sergeant Murphy has killed more enemy soldiers than any other man in the company and shows absolutely no fear under fire. The pattern continued through the Italian campaign. Murphy fought at Cisterna, where he won the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second highest decoration, for destroying a German tank and killing its crew with grenades, then holding a position against counterattack for over an hour. He fought at the Battle of Rapido River, the drive to Rome, and through the Italian summer campaign of 1944. By the time the 3rd Infantry Division withdrew from Italy to prepare for Operation Dragoon, the invasion of southern France, Murphy had been promoted to staff sergeant and then, in July 1944, to 2nd lieutenant through a battlefield commission. He was not yet 20 years old. His body bore the evidence of his service: shrapnel scars, multiple instances of malaria contracted in Italy, and the psychological weight of too many friends killed and too many close calls survived. Operation Dragoon in August 1944 went well for the 3rd Infantry Division. Landing on the French Riviera, the division drove rapidly northward through southern France, pursuing retreating German forces. Murphy's Company B fought numerous actions during this pursuit, and Murphy continued adding to his combat record. Near Montelima, he won his first Silver Star for leading a patrol that killed or captured an entire German outpost. Near Lyon, he won the Bronze Star for valor in house-to-house fighting. By October 1944, as Company B crossed into Alsace, Murphy had fought through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, and southern France, nearly 2 years of continuous combat. The physical and psychological toll was evident to those who knew him well. Murphy had developed what would later be called PTSD, nightmares, hypervigilance, difficulty sleeping. He had watched too many friends die, killed too many enemy soldiers, and survived too many situations where survival seemed impossible. Yet he continued to lead, continued to fight, because his men needed him, and because the war wasn't finished. The fighting around Holtzwihr in late January 1945 was part of the larger operation to eliminate the Colmar Pocket. Company B had been tasked with seizing positions near the village to support the main French/American advance. On January 25, Murphy's company captured positions in a wooded area near Holtzwihr, but immediately came under heavy German pressure. The Germans recognized that these positions threatened their defensive line and committed significant forces to retake them. Throughout January 25 and into the night, Company B repulsed several German probes, but Murphy knew from intelligence reports and observation that a major German counterattack was forming. The German forces assembling included infantry from the 708th Volksgrenadier Division and armor support from Panzergrenadier units, experienced troops who knew that the Colmar Pocket's days were numbered and were fighting with the desperation of soldiers who might soon be trapped against the Rhine. The morning of January 26, 1945, broke cold and clear over Holtzwihr, unusual for winter in Alsace, where fog and overcast were typical. Murphy's Company B numbered approximately 40 men at dawn, about 1/5 of its authorized strength. They held a defensive position at the edge of a wooded area overlooking open fields that stretched nearly 300 yards to the German lines. Murphy had positioned his men carefully: 2 light machine gun teams, several BAR, Browning automatic rifle gunners, and riflemen spread across the tree line. Supporting them was a single M10 tank destroyer from the 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion, positioned in the open field about 100 yards forward of the infantry line. The M10's crew consisted of 5 men, commanded by Sergeant Robert Hawley. The tank destroyer's mission was to provide anti-tank support if German armor appeared, and its .50 caliber machine gun could supplement the infantry's firepower. At approximately 1400 hours, 2 p.m., German artillery began falling on American positions, a preparatory bombardment signaling an imminent attack. Murphy ordered his men to take cover in their foxholes while he observed the German lines through binoculars. What he saw chilled him. At least 6 Panzer and Stug assault guns were moving into position, and behind them came waves of infantry, at least 2 companies, possibly 250–300 soldiers. The Germans were attacking in overwhelming strength, and Murphy's depleted company faced annihilation. He immediately called for American artillery support, but the response from the Fire Direction Center was devastating. All artillery assets were committed to other sectors, and no fire support would be available for at least 30 minutes, maybe longer. Murphy was on his own. The German assault began at 14:15 hours. 6 German armored vehicles, a mix of Panzer IVs and Stug 3 assault guns, advanced across the frozen fields, with infantry moving behind them in squad-sized groups using the armor for cover. German machine guns laid down suppressive fire, raking the American positions. Murphy's men returned fire, but they were badly outnumbered and outgunned. The M10 tank destroyer opened fire. Its 3-inch gun scored a hit on 1 German Stug, but almost immediately drew concentrated fire from the other German vehicles. Within minutes, the M10 was hit multiple times. Though the armor wasn't penetrated, the engine was damaged and caught fire. Sergeant Hawley and his crew bailed out of the burning vehicle and ran back toward the American lines, leaving the M10 burning in the middle of the field. Murphy watched in horror as the German infantry, emboldened by the destruction of the American tank destroyer, surged forward. They were now less than 200 yards from his positions and closing. If they reached the tree line, Company B would be overrun in minutes. Close quarters fighting against 10-to-1 odds with no chance of survival. Murphy faced an impossible choice: order a withdrawal and probably see his men cut down as they retreated across open ground, or find some way to stop the German attack. What Murphy did next defied all rational thinking, but was perfectly consistent with the combat instincts that had kept him alive through 2 years of war. Murphy sprinted from his position toward the burning M10 tank destroyer, carrying the radio handset from the field telephone. His men shouted at him to come back, but Murphy kept running. He reached the burning vehicle. Flames were now visible from the engine compartment, and ammunition inside could cook off at any moment, and climbed onto the rear deck. The M10's .50 caliber machine gun was still mounted and operational. Murphy grabbed the weapon, checked that ammunition was loaded, and turned toward the advancing Germans. He was now standing fully exposed on top of a burning vehicle, 100 yards in front of his own lines, facing an entire German company. The Germans, shocked to see an American soldier standing in plain sight on the burning vehicle, initially hesitated, perhaps thinking it was a trap. That hesitation cost them precious seconds. Murphy opened fire.
The .50 caliber machine gun roared, sending heavy rounds into the German formations at a cyclic rate of 450 to 600 rounds per minute. The effect was devastating. German soldiers fell in groups as Murphy traversed the gun across their formations. Those Germans still standing went to ground, seeking cover in the frozen field, but there was precious little cover available. Murphy kept firing in controlled bursts, targeting officers and machine gun crews first, then shifting to clusters of infantry trying to organize. The Germans returned fire. Hundreds of rifles and machine guns all aimed at the figure standing on the burning tank destroyer. Bullets cracked past Murphy's head, struck the M10's turret, kicked up snow around the vehicle, but somehow missed the exposed lieutenant. Murphy later said he felt bullets tug at his uniform and heard them snap past his ears, but his focus was entirely on killing Germans. While firing the machine gun with one hand, Murphy used the other to hold the field telephone handset, maintaining contact with the battalion fire direction center. When artillery support finally became available, Murphy began directing fire onto the German positions with extraordinary precision. He would fire a burst from the machine gun, speak into the phone to adjust artillery, then fire again. His artillery corrections were called out calmly and professionally despite the chaos around him. Drop 50, fire for effect, good shooting, now shift left 100 yards. American 105mm howitzer shells began falling among the German formations, adding to the carnage Murphy was inflicting with the machine gun. German soldiers who tried to advance were cut down. Those who stayed in place were hit by artillery. The German attack stalled completely, pinned down by one man's firepower. The Germans made multiple attempts to flank the burning tank destroyer and kill Murphy, but each time his machine gun fire or artillery shells drove them back. German tank commanders, recognizing that this single American was destroying their attack, directed fire at the M10. High explosive and armor-piercing rounds struck near Murphy, showering him with debris and shrapnel. One round struck close enough that the blast threw Murphy partially off the vehicle, but he pulled himself back up and continued firing. All the while, the M10 continued burning beneath him. The ammunition inside was heating up, and everyone watching, both Americans and Germans, knew the vehicle could explode at any moment, incinerating anyone on or near it. Murphy's own men pleaded with him over the radio to get off the vehicle, but he refused, knowing that if he abandoned the machine gun, the German attack would resume and his company would be overrun.
At some point during the hour-long firefight, witnesses later disagreed on exactly when, Murphy was wounded. A German round struck his right leg, tearing through muscle and causing significant bleeding. Murphy barely reacted, shifting his weight to his left leg and continuing to fire. The pain was intense, but Murphy had been wounded before and knew how to function through it. His concentration remained absolute. Track targets, fire-controlled bursts, call artillery corrections, scan for new threats. The machine gun barrel grew hot from continuous firing, and Murphy had to pause periodically to allow it to cool slightly. During these brief pauses, he would reload ammunition belts, check his wound, and assess the tactical situation. The German attack had completely stalled. Bodies lay scattered across the snowy field, and the surviving Germans were either pinned down or attempting to withdraw. After approximately 1 hour, some accounts say 50 minutes, others say over an hour, Murphy finally exhausted the ammunition for the .50 caliber machine gun. The field telephone line had been cut by German fire, ending his artillery direction capability. The M10 beneath him was still burning and by now was dangerously hot. Surveying the battlefield, Murphy could see that the German attack had been completely broken. The enemy infantry was withdrawing, dragging wounded comrades, and the German armor was pulling back. Murphy climbed down from the M10, his right leg barely supporting his weight, and began limping back toward his own lines. Company B, which had watched the entire action in stunned disbelief, erupted in cheers. Several soldiers ran forward to help Murphy back to the tree line, where a medic immediately began treating his leg wound. As Company B consolidated their position and tended to wounded, the scale of what Murphy had accomplished became clear. The battlefield before them was littered with German casualties. Later estimates suggested Murphy had killed or wounded approximately 50 enemy soldiers during his hour on the burning tank destroyer. The German attack, which had threatened to overrun an entire American company, had been stopped by one man. An entire German company had been rendered combat ineffective, and their supporting armor had withdrawn. Murphy had saved not just his own men, but had prevented a German breakthrough that could have endangered the entire sector of the Colmar Pocket operation. Military analysts who later studied the engagement noted that Murphy's action was tactically brilliant as well as personally courageous. By positioning himself forward of his own lines, he drew German fire away from his vulnerable infantrymen, and his elevated position on the tank destroyer gave him excellent observation for directing artillery. Murphy had saved not just his own men, but had prevented a German breakthrough that could have endangered the entire sector of the Colmar Pocket operation. Murphy was evacuated to a field hospital for treatment of his leg wound. The wound was serious enough to warrant evacuation to a rear area hospital, but Murphy refused, insisting on returning to Company B after receiving basic treatment. He spent one night at the battalion aid station, then returned to his unit the next day. His company commander, Captain James Burt, himself a Medal of Honor recipient from later actions, immediately recommended Murphy for the Medal of Honor. The recommendation was supported by multiple eyewitnesses, including the M10 crew that had abandoned the burning vehicle and watched Murphy's action from the American lines. The citation process moved quickly. Murphy's action was so clearly exceptional that there was no debate about the appropriateness of the nation's highest military decoration. The Medal of Honor was not Murphy's first decoration, nor would it be his last. By January 1945, Murphy had already received the Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars, 2 Bronze Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts, along with numerous campaign ribbons and foreign decorations. But the Medal of Honor represented recognition of the highest order, an action so far beyond the call of duty that it stood apart from even extraordinary combat service. The citation, signed by President Harry S. Truman, read in part, "Second Lieutenant Murphy commanded Company B, which was attacked by 6 tanks and waves of infantry. Lieutenant Murphy ordered his men to withdraw to a prepared position in a woods while he remained forward at his command post and continued to give fire directions to the artillery by telephone. Behind him, to his right, one of our tank destroyers received a direct hit and began to burn. Its crew withdrew to the woods. Lieutenant Murphy continued to direct artillery fire, which killed large numbers of the advancing enemy infantry. With the enemy tanks abreast of his position, Lieutenant Murphy climbed on the burning tank destroyer, which was in danger of blowing up at any moment, and employed its .50 caliber machine gun against the enemy." Murphy's Medal of Honor action at Holtzwihr was the culmination of his combat career, but not quite its end. He continued fighting with the 3rd Infantry Division through the final months of the war, participating in the drive into Germany and the eventual German surrender in May 1945. When the war ended, Murphy's decoration total was extraordinary: Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, 2 Silver Stars plus 1 upgrade, Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars plus 1 upgrade, 3 Purple Hearts, and numerous other U.S. and foreign decorations, 33 awards in total, making him the most decorated U.S. combat soldier of World War II. His awards came from multiple countries. In addition to U.S. decorations, Murphy received France's Legion of Honor and Croix de Guerre with Palm, and Belgium's Croix de Guerre. These weren't parade ground medals. Each represented specific combat actions where Murphy had risked his life and demonstrated exceptional courage. Murphy's post-war life was both triumphant and troubled. Life magazine featured him on its cover in July 1945, and Hollywood quickly took notice of the photogenic young war hero. Murphy appeared in 44 films between 1948 and 1969, including playing himself in To Hell and Back, 1955, based on his best-selling autobiography. He became a successful actor, songwriter, and businessman. But Murphy also struggled with what we now call PTSD. He suffered from nightmares, insomnia, and depression. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow and sometimes woke up believing he was back in combat. Murphy was one of the first prominent figures to speak publicly about post-combat psychological trauma, advocating for better treatment of veterans with what was then called battle fatigue. Murphy died in a plane crash on May 28, 1971, at age 45, while traveling to a business meeting. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors, his grave marked by a simple white headstone, identical to all others in the cemetery. Murphy had specifically requested no special marker. His funeral was attended by hundreds, including veterans from his old unit, dignitaries, and Hollywood figures. Murphy's grave became one of the most visited at Arlington, second only to President John F. Kennedy's. To this day, admirers leave flowers, military coins, and American flags at his headstone. The epitaph Murphy had chosen for himself was characteristically modest: Audie L. Murphy, Texas, Major, United States Army. Murphy's legacy extends far beyond his combat record and Hollywood career. He became the personification of the American combat soldier, the young man from humble circumstances who rises to meet impossible challenges through courage, skill, and determination. His autobiography, To Hell and Back, became one of the best-selling WWII memoirs, offering readers an unflinching look at combat from a frontline infantryman's perspective. Unlike many war memoirs that glorify combat, Murphy's writing emphasized the fear, exhaustion, and moral complexity of killing. He described combat as organized chaos and spoke honestly about the psychological cost of war. This honesty helped shape how Americans understood their soldiers' experiences and contributed to greater recognition of combat trauma. Military institutions study Murphy's actions, particularly the Holtzwihr engagement, as examples of battlefield leadership and tactical decision-making under extreme pressure. The U.S. Army's Infantry School at Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning, uses Murphy's Medal of Honor action as a case study in leadership courses, emphasizing how Murphy's decision to expose himself to save his men exemplified the no greater love principle, the willingness of leaders to sacrifice themselves for their soldiers. His action also demonstrates how individual initiative at critical moments can have strategic impact. By stopping the German attack at Holtzwihr, Murphy contributed to the successful elimination of the Kalmar pocket, which in turn facilitated the Allied advance to the Rhine and into Germany. Numerous memorials and institutions honor Murphy's memory. The Audie Murphy/American Cotton Museum in Greenville, Texas, preserves artifacts from his life and educates visitors about World War II. The VA hospital in San Antonio, Texas, is named the Audie L. Murphy Memorial Veterans Hospital. Murphy's hometown of Farmersville, Texas, maintains a memorial statue. The 3rd Infantry Division still honors Murphy as perhaps its greatest soldier, and units within the division bear his name or teach his tactics. Most significantly, Murphy's advocacy for veterans with PTSD helped establish precedents for veterans' mental health care that continue today. His willingness to speak publicly about his struggles at a time when mental health issues carried significant stigma, especially for a military hero, opened doors for other veterans to seek help. The story of Audie Murphy reminds us that heroes often emerge from the unlikeliest places. A poor Texas farm boy who stood barely 5.5 feet tall and was initially rejected by every branch of the military became the most decorated American soldier of history's largest war. Murphy's courage at Holtzwihr was extraordinary by any measure. Standing on a burning vehicle that could explode at any moment, wounded, facing an entire enemy company, holding them off for an hour through sheer determination and skill with a machine gun. But this single action, as remarkable as it was, represented just one day in a combat career that spanned from North Africa to Germany, from 1943 to 1945. Years of continuous combat that few soldiers could endure without breaking.
Murphy's decorations tell a story of sustained excellence under the most extreme conditions imaginable, but they can't fully convey the psychological cost he and millions like him paid for victory. Murphy's life after the war, his success in Hollywood, his struggles with PTSD, his advocacy for veterans, his tragic early death, reminds us that soldiers don't simply return unchanged from war. The young man who climbed onto that burning tank destroyer in January 1945 survived the war, but carried its scars forever. His willingness to speak honestly about these scars helped break the silence surrounding combat trauma and contributed to better understanding and treatment of what we now call PTSD. Today, as we remember Murphy's extraordinary courage, we should also remember his message about the cost of war and the debt we owe to those who serve. Murphy never considered himself a hero. He called himself a soldier who did his duty alongside other soldiers, many of whom died doing theirs. He believed the real heroes were the ones who didn't come back, and he dedicated much of his post-war life to ensuring they were remembered. In honoring Audie Murphy, we honor all who served, all who sacrificed, and all who continue to serve today, knowing they walk in the footsteps of giants like the young lieutenant from Texas who stood alone against an army. Audie Murphy, the undersized Texas farm boy rejected by every branch of service, who became America's most decorated combat soldier by standing alone on a burning tank destroyer against 250 Germans, wounded and exposed for over an hour. His 33 military decorations, including the Medal of Honor, tell a story of sustained heroism from North Africa to Germany. But Murphy's greatest legacy may be his honesty about combat's psychological cost and his advocacy for veterans struggling with what he called battle fatigue. He proved that true heroes aren't fearless. They fight despite their fear, and they continue fighting even when wounded, outnumbered, and outgunned because their comrades depend on them. If this story inspired you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more forgotten tales of WWI and WII heroes. Next time, we'll explore another extraordinary story, Desmond Doss, the combat medic who refused to carry a weapon yet saved 75 men at Hacksaw Ridge and became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Let's close with Murphy's own words about heroism. I'll tell you what bravery really is. Bravery is just determination to do a job that you know has to be done. Audie Murphy did his job, again and again, in the face of death, and we honor his memory and the memory of all who served alongside him.